in the lead up to the Olympics, like I had a lot of self-doubt because I'm like looking at all these other athletes around me and how much experience that they have in this particular space of Skimo. I had to find a way to like convince myself that I did belong and believe in myself when there was like basically zero data that felt applicable. I think now I could like go do anything and I could find a way to just like try and be as confident as possible on the start line. And that's like feels like a good place to be in. This might sound crazy to say because it's the Olympics, but like I literally just scratched the tip of the iceberg with that. I definitely want to continue to race kind of in this like Olympic world because I think it's incredibly fun and I had the best time. And, you know, getting fourth place is like that will haunt you in a good way where you're like, I gotta go back. But I also think there's like so much more to explore with the sport.
You're listening to Endurance Unlimited, a TrainingPeaks podcast for athletes and coaches, no matter what you're training for. Dial in those workouts with deep insights and cutting-edge science from the most prominent voices in the endurance and hybrid sports world. Conventional wisdom tells you to specialize, to narrow your focus, and to eliminate distractions at all costs. Our guest today is a living counter-argument to that entire philosophy. She calls Jackson Hole, Wyoming, home. Anna Gibson is a professional trail runner and a 1,500-meter Olympic trials semifinalist who can trade blows with the fastest track specialists in the country. But she doesn't stop at the trailhead. In 2025, she captured the USA Track and Field mountain running title and a World Trail Running Championship bronze. And then, in one of the most stunning pivots in recent memory, she picked up ski mountaineering. Just 6 months after starting the sport, she found herself finishing fourth at the 2026 Winter Olympics in Cortina, Italy. With the Leadville 100 mountain bike race now on her horizon, Anna is proving that following what genuinely excites you isn't a distraction from excellence. It is the mechanism for it. We're diving into how a multi-sport engine actually works and why versatility might just be your greatest competitive asset. I hope you enjoy this fascinating episode. Anna Gibson, welcome to Endurance Unlimited podcast. Awesome to have you on.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
I'm really excited just because I typically interview one sport athletes, and you are anything but a one sport athlete. I think you would agree, and everybody will hear about. My Lord, we're going to go through everything that you compete in, but it's just so cool how diverse you are. You're just coming off, like literally a couple months ago, the Olympics. I mean, okay, it's summertime now, but the Olympics were in February in Cortina. How's life treating you after leaving the Olympics?
Oh gosh, yeah, it has been good. This has been the craziest winter and spring I've ever had. Yeah, I mean, the high of the Olympics is definitely something that you feel when you come off of it. So I feel like I was on like a little bit of a roller coaster for a bit, just like some days waking up feeling super motivated, some days being like really unmotivated. And so I just took a very solid off season and did not think about
Nice.
racing, didn't really train on any structure for a while. And I feel like I'm kind of just now like getting back to my normal baseline and like feeling excited about racing and training and everything all over again. So it's been good.
That's good to hear, but I've heard about some athletes having depression after the Olympics. It sounded like you did need some downtime.
I definitely needed downtime. And it was honestly more of like a mental downswing than I would have expected. Like you come home and you know, it's really exciting for like a couple of weeks, like coming back to Jackson, which is where I grew up and
Yeah.
you know, where everyone who's seen my entire athletic journey is living. And so going anywhere felt very exciting, but then sort of once all of that like initial excitement after the Olympics wore off, it was like, okay, what do I do now? And obviously there's lots to do, but that was just kind of like the resounding feeling that I had. And like, I totally understand how that's difficult for a lot of athletes. It was like a really interesting emotional experience to go through.
Yeah. I mean, you have a lot going on in your life, and I guess a lot was put on the back burner. I mean, you have a master's degree in environmental law from University of Washington. You coach,
hmm
you are a elite athlete, obviously multi-sport. I mean, how do you, it feels like this is a trend throughout your entire life. You've kind of like been balancing different hats throughout, I guess, growing up there in Jackson. And this is just a continuation. You haven't chosen the one path, the one typical path? And is that just because you like to keep things exciting?
Yeah, I mean, I think, at this point, it's like I would call it a strategy. Like, it's my strategy for being my best version of, like, myself in whatever context I'm in. I think that I'm not the kind of person who thrives by being super laser focused in on one
Mhm.
thing, for too long. Like, that's not to say that I'm not focused. Like, as I'm leading into the Trail World Championships, I'm like, literally, this is the most important thing ever. Like, I give everything to that goal. Leading into the Skimo Olympics, I'm like, I'm a Skimo athlete through and through. Like, I give a lot to that, both physically and emotionally. But I like to change from one thing to the next pretty frequently. So, yeah, at times that's been, being pretty focused on school, and at times that's trail, at times that's racing my bike, at times that's Skimo, and sometimes it's just like going on whatever crazy adventures I want to go on, which has been,
Yeah.
the kind of space that I've been in for the last couple months since the Olympics.
Nice. Well, if we go back in time and kind of go through your journey as an athlete, I mean, it started, I mean, at what age do you start doing Alpine racing? I mean, you grew up in Jackson Hole, so you're on the mountain daily and you were running gates like Alpine ski racing. When did that start?
I was ski racing as soon as they would let me on the team, which I think is like maybe starts at 7 years old or so.
Nice.
Um,
Yeah.
and that just felt like a really natural thing to do because both my parents are ski bums. We lived right at the base of Jackson Hole Mountain Resort. And so I had just been on snow, and that was like kind of just the culture that I was existing in. So it felt very like natural to start doing that as my kind of first like competitive sport.
Yeah. And then you transitioned at one point into cross country Nordic skiing?
I did. Yeah, so through middle school, I was downhill racing, and I had also started running cross country and track. And so I was like making this massive shift from one thing to the next. And I started to get pretty excited about running. Like I'd
Yeah.
had some good results, and I was like so in love with the feeling of pushing myself in that way. And I had like a great crew of friends. And so as I was like going into high school, I kind of was like sensing this shift in like the downhill world of things being very adrenaline oriented, like very much for power athletes who like to go fast and like feel the rush. And I was learning that I don't love that. And I'm also not built in that way. Like I'm just more of an endurance athlete. And so
Yeah.
I decided to switch over to Nordic racing, which I had been Nordic skiing my whole life. Like that was another thing that my parents introduced me to very young. And I had actually like raced here and there because my older sister was competing in it. And so middle school I did downhill, and then high school I switched over to Nordic, kind of sandwiched between
And
my 2 running seasons.
but you were nationally ranked. You went to nationals, et cetera, in Nordic, right?
I did. Yeah, I actually won a national title my senior year of high school.
Wow. So all of this is like forming behind the scenes. You have the skills that are necessary. Obviously, in Skimo, you run a few gates in Skimo at the Olympics, right? You got to be on edge and not lose an edge. You have those skills. You're building the endurance through Nordic skiing. But then now trail running is kind of like happening behind the scenes throughout all this as well, throughout high school.
It is, yeah. So we have some really great local trail races. They're mostly hill climbs and then like one kind of point to point race. And so those were like very encouraged by our cross country coaches in high school. So I started doing them in the summers, just like as a fun thing to do with my teammates. And also like we would go warm up on trails, run a track workout, go cool down on the trails. Like everything in Jackson is just super close together.
Yeah.
So I started kind of getting introduced to the competitive trail running world that way. And then, yeah, I just was like totally loving it, and kind of always like felt like there was more for me in that space.
And at some point, you take up two wheels, and I believe you've done some gravel racing in the last couple of years somewhere.
Just the last 1 year. Yeah, last
All
year,
right.
it started like last February. I did a race, and loved it, and then I decided to do 2 more during the summer. And so I've only raced my
Ah,
bike 3 times, but yeah, really enjoy it, and I look forward to doing some more this summer.
so, gosh, I mean, again, so now speaking of taking it on, a year ago, I went to the U.S. Ski Mountaineering Association national team training camp in Bozeman, Montana, and you were not there.
I did.
You are now actually leaving this week for the very same camp. You are officially on the national team a year later, and a lot has happened in this year. You went to the Olympics. I mean, this is the headline, right? And but you went to an Olympics in a kind of a sport you really didn't ever compete in prior. Maybe you did your first race a couple months prior to qualifying for the Olympics. Um, but I know the story. I love the story. But tell us how you got involved in this pathway towards the Olympics and Cam Smith, and how did all your teammate in the Olympics? How did this all come together?
Yeah. So I guess I should start. I think a lot of people are aware of Skimo now, but maybe haven't been for a super, super
Yeah.
long time unless they're like very into this, sport niche sport world in the endurance space. But I actually both my parents raced in the Randonnée Rally, which was one of the first, if not the first Skimo race in North America, like way back when. So I remember
Where
watching
was
them.
that?
It's in Jackson. It
Okay.
doesn't happen anymore, but it was like 2004. Somebody looked up. My dad raced in 2004. So I would have been 5
Oh.
years old. And I remember watching him. So I was like aware of Skimo as a general concept back then, as like a competitive race sport.
Yeah.
Then like fast forward, until I'm like, I'm in college at the University of Washington. I'm like giving a lot of my effort to being the fastest 1500-meter track runner that I can be. And I find out that Skimo has been added to the Olympics for 2026. And I'm getting a couple phone calls from people like, hey, we know you're a Nordic racer and we think you'd be pretty good at the Skimo thing. Like, it's in the Olympics. Do you want to try? And I did want to try. I was definitely very tempted 4 years ago, but it just didn't really fit the picture of like my life in that moment. I was pretty committed to school and to running. And I was like, I don't know, somewhere in between. So I ended up taking an NIL deal the first year that that was available to college athletes with Dynafit, and they sent me
Okay.
my first Skimo setup. And I was just like kind of closet training on them. Like I would take them up to Snoqualmie Pass outside of Seattle, and I would like do my ski early in the morning, and then I'd like drive down and I'd go to training at 10 a.m. with everyone
Wow.
else and like go running. And so at that point, I was like, no, like I'm not going to do the Olympics, but I do want to do Skimo eventually, and I'm just gonna like kind of dabble in like using this equipment. And I loved it. And so that was the kind of the first awareness of the Olympic path. And then it wasn't actually until July of this last year, I guess late June, when I was at Broken Arrow last year with Cam Smith, who ended up being my relay partner at the Olympics. And he came up to me at Broken Arrow and was like, he had this like classic, now somewhat famous one liner of like, tell me if the answer is no and I'll never ask you again. But like, hear me out. Skimo's the best. The US could make it to the Olympics and we need you. Like, do you want to try? And in that conversation, I was like, okay, just give me the whole rundown. Like, how would this even work? Like, I'm not on the national team. How do I get on the national team? Where do I need to race? What's our qualification pathway? Like, I had a million questions and I just like
Yeah.
fired them off at Cam. And he was like so patient, told me everything, then connected me with the USA Skimo staff. And they like filled me in more and like kind of verified that, like, yes, there was still a pathway to like me trying to help the team out. And worst case scenario, I'm not useful and someone else or multiple other people on the team end up filling that spot. And it's all great. Like no one really loses by me trying. Um, and so I like thought about it for a week and was like, oh, this is like so crazy. I don't know if I can pull this off with my running career and like everything else I have going on. And then I just like had this burning itch to just like figure it out and to try and to like follow this curiosity. And I am just the kind of athlete that like once I have an idea that I'm curious about, I cannot get it out of my head. And so I just committed to the process right then and there and decided to try.
Wow. But I mean, parallel to this, you went to the World Trail Running Championships in September 2025, and you got bronze in the uphill, right?
Hmm.
And so you're focused on like World Championships running. But then also you're like, well, what about this Olympic thing that's like 2 months later you have to qualify for? So how are you just like mentally dealing with that? I mean, you're going from the World Championships to the next race is the Olympic qualifiers for Skimo.
Yeah. I mean, that was maybe the craziest thing about this whole process was that right before the Trail World Championships, there was a training camp with the US team for
Uh-huh.
Skimo over in Italy. And I this is so rogue of me, but I said yes to going to this training camp, like literally the week before Trail Worlds, which like
Wow.
this is a huge deal for me to be going to Trail Worlds. Like I knew I was a contender in that uphill race, especially like I've given a lot of effort and energy towards, like, being at my best at that event, and then here I am, like, saying that I'm gonna go to a camp with a bunch of athletes who I have not even met yet, and, like, work with coaches who I don't know, and I just went full send, and it ended up being, like, one of the best weeks of my life. Like, I had such an incredible time. We went skiing on the glacier on the Stelvio just above Bormio, like, looked down into the valley, and everyone's like, "Oh, that's where the Olympics is gonna be in February, like, we hope we make it there." And then we went running around in the Dolomites, and
Wow.
I had this moment with Cam, that we have since, like, reminisced on where he was also at this training camp, and we were on this run together way up in the mountains, and we're, like, scrambling up this, like, technical ridgeline, just being like, "Wow, this is so fun." We actually just set ourselves up so well to perform at Trail Worlds because we're just, like, so high on life, and we're having the best time, and we're like, "This is the whole point." Like, the whole point is to
Yeah.
just, like, take opportunities and just, like, seize them and make the most of everything that comes your way, and we're like, "Wow, like, we just are
Wow.
winning the lottery right now," and then we both went to Trail Worlds and did great, and it was, like,
Yeah.
not a coincidence, like, this was actually I think that I credit that week with the Skimo team as, like, being partly why I ran so well at Trail Worlds, and I'm really glad that I did it.
Wow. That's awesome. But how do you then switch up training? I mean, trail world championships, but then you quickly focus to Skimo and the Olympic format where you guys excelled and got fourth was the mixed relay. So you would do a lap, tag off to Cam, he would do a lap, he'd tag off to you, and he would finish up. And those are like 7-minute laps. So
Yeah.
how do you switch up your training to focus on this like pure anaerobic VO2 max effort coming off like a trail running preparation? How do you what was the how would you what's the first thing you changed in your training?
Um I mean, to be honest, the first thing that I did was, take a little bit of a break and, like, a step back,
Yeah.
and, I also had, like, a number of commitments during that time in between Trail Worlds and then the, um, national race and the World Cup qualifier. That those were, like, the first, the 2 kinda steps leading into the Olympics for us, for Skimo. And I had just, like, run a full season. I'd been racing since April. And so I was like, "Okay, I need to, like, get my body back to and my brain
Mhm.
back to being in a good place to be able to handle training." And so recovery was, like, a really big piece of that. I ended up, like, going on a fun running trip to Patagonia. I went down the Grand Canyon and, like, didn't train. And then the time in between those 2 trips, I also, was, like, trying to sprinkle in just, like, really high intensity and, yeah, like, kinda get my, like, sprint vibes back
Wow.
because I hadn't been doing any of that training for trail. It was like I don't know, it felt kind of piecemeal, to be honest. It wasn't like there was ever really, like, a long-term plan of this happening, and so it was like, "Okay, I finished Trail Worlds, and now we just" like, my coach and I just had to figure out what I needed to do to, like, get to being in the best place in December and then again in February, and that was just,
Yeah.
like, very piecemeal. There was no, like, long-term strategic plan.
Also, there's a skill development part of Schemo as well. I mean, you have like the downhill kind of ingrained, but these transitions, I mean, that took probably a bunch of your time because that's literally where the race can be won or lost is like in the transition box itself.
Yeah, I would actually say, like, that was the biggest thing that I was training. I was not that worried about the fitness that I needed or doing super specific workouts that were tailored towards the mixed relay and the sprint format. Like, the training that I needed to do to, like, target my biggest weakness with Skimo was, like, literally just to do transitions, and fortunately, I could start doing that before there was snow on the ground, so,
Yeah.
like, that started for me mid-August.
Okay.
I, like, had all my Skimo gear dialed, and I would just, like, go for my training run, whatever I was doing to train for Trail Worlds, and I would, like, come back, be tired, and, like, mentally a little bit out of it, and, like, force myself to do 30 to 45 minutes of
Wow.
transition work, multiple times a week, sometimes every day, and I just got, like, so much better. It was honestly really satisfying. It's like learning how to do a kickflip on a skateboard. It's like you just are bad, 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 and then all of a sudden you, like, kinda figure it out, and then you just get really good at it, and it was, like, the repetition of doing that, like, I don't know, I haven't had to learn a new skill like that in the same way in a really long time, and it was really fun.
What did you learn from Schemo racing that may have helped trail running?
My gosh, it's like, what didn't I learn? I feel like I learned so much in this whole journey. Like, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that I in the lead up to the Olympics, like I had a lot of self-doubt because I'm like looking at all these other athletes around me and how much experience that they have in this particular space of Skimo
Right.
and thinking about how that compares to my experience, which is basically zero. And that made me like definitely doubt myself. Like, do I belong here? Like, am I the right person for this? And it's like I had to find a way to like convince myself that I did belong and believe in myself when there was like basically zero data that felt applicable. And so I was
Mm,
like drawing on other areas of my life or like, other sports that I have experience in that maybe they don't or whatnot.
yeah.
And to like figure out how to believe in myself when there's like not a long line of results and experiences to draw on was really valuable because I'm like, I think now I could like go do anything and I could find a way to just like try and be as confident as possible on the start
Oh
line.
my
And that's
gosh.
like feels like a good place to be in.
Yeah. It is amazing to think you've never even done yet a world championships. You kind of skipped worlds and went to the Olympics. But you're on the start line with these just incredible Italians and the Spanish team, the Swiss team, and they've got decades, effectively in them, of world championships. No one has had an Olympic experience until that same day. And you guys got fourth. I mean, the US hadn't ever won a World Cup until you guys did, in Utah in Solitude in early December. Um, I wonder about, with all these different sports going on in your life, which ones complement another one the best? As a cyclist, I think, oh, cycling can really help your running. I'm not sure running helps my cycling so much, like me being a cyclist, right? So which ones kind of like really team up and are really natural that can maybe push and elevate the other sport?
Mm. Um, I'm inclined to say honestly all of them. I think
All right.
they can be definitely bad for each other also. Like it's not
Mm.
that they're universally good for each other. But I
Or the
do think
timing.
that yeah, the timing is incredibly important and also like taking a break from each of them at periods of the year is also incredibly
Mm.
important. Like you just
Mm.
can't for me, I can't run all year round and feel good running. Like I have to like step away before and after each season. Um, Same with the biking. It's like it's actually really good for me to not ride in the winter and like let that rest. Same with skiing, like put it away in the middle of the summer. Um, but I think that like I don't know, let's look at like the perspective of like me, kind of being predominantly a runner because that's sort of like where I'm coming out of. I don't know what that will look like in the future. But like if we consider my quote unquote main sport running, then I think that like as long as I'm running enough, like everything else that I'm doing that's like additional aerobic volume is helping. It's like
Right.
if I dial back the running, then all of a sudden, like you're saying, the cycling, like maybe it doesn't like quite contribute enough. Like you're working on kind of different muscles, like building power in a different way. And it won't like, it's not like a cyclist could just go for a run and like feel good. Like I have to be
Yeah.
running 30 miles a week and like doing a speed workout. And then it's like, oh, now the cycling is like really effective, actually.
Uh,
It's great for my running. And I feel kind of
yeah. Yeah.
similarly about skiing. Like I think it's if you just skied and then tried to run, you wouldn't be fast at running. But like doing enough running and skiing on the side is actually great. It's very effective for me.
Yeah. I'm not at your level, but I definitely alternate between, ski touring, skimo, and cycling. And, I come out of the skimo season, I feel like really strong as a cyclist. But I do a little transition of running in the fall to lead into skiing. And I'm like, oh my Lord, like my body takes a beating. I got to weather that phase. We spoke, I believe, in Utah, I think, and thinking about things you might do in the future. The topic of like the Power of Four and Grand Traverse came up, and you've never done either of those or other big European grand, races on skis. Any thoughts around goals or future endeavors around any of the big um, grand skimo races?
Yeah. I mean, wow, I'm so curious about them. I feel like I just this might sound crazy to say because it's the Olympics, but like I literally just scratched the tip of the iceberg with that. Like I have done what is it, 4 skimo races now, and
Yeah.
they were all sprint or mixed relay. And I don't honestly think that those are like the best suited to my physiology or my training in this particular moment in time. Like,
Yeah.
I actually think that I'm probably better suited for a long distance race. Um, and I also just love the environment of being like out in the mountains, you know, in like a wild environment like that. And so I think that like, yeah, I'm excited to get to explore and like figure out where my passion actually lies with this sport, like beyond what I have experienced so far. Like I definitely want to
Right.
continue to race kind of in this like Olympic world because I think it's incredibly fun and I had the best time. And, you know, getting fourth place is like that will haunt you in a good way where you're like, I gotta go back. Like I will keep
Yeah.
doing sprinting and I will keep doing mixed relay if those are the Olympic disciplines in the future. But I
Yeah.
also think there's like so much more to explore with the sport. Oh, there will be a lot more Skimo in my future.
If we go back a little bit more in time to 2024, you actually were in the Olympic trials for the 1500 meter on the track running, and you made the semifinals in the 1500 Olympic trials. Is all trail running set aside for the 6 months leading up to that day, or how did you balance those two, running quick turnover on the track for the 1500 versus trail running?
Um, this is like gonna be revealing a lot about my character, but no, I was during this time I was like trying to do as much trail as possible while also being ready for the 1500 and I was an absolute kook. I decided that I was gonna run the K at Broken Arrow 6 days before the first round of the
Wow,
1500 at the Olympic trials.
did
And
not know that.
yeah, I that this is like I think one of the reasons why I said yes to doing Skimo is because there were 2 other instances before the Skimo question entered the chat of me saying yes to doing weird ideas that I'd had in my head. Like the first one was doing the VK and then doing the Olympic trials within a week, which is like so rogue. Like if you know things about track, you know that that is not a normal not normal behavior. Like track athletes are so locked in and so exacting
Yeah.
and worried about every split second. And I was like, let me just go run up a mountain really hard, see how that goes. And then the next one after that was the bike racing, which was like a total experiment, did not know how that was going to go. I'm like, I mean, I could just crash, like I could just get hurt and then derail my whole season. But I just like was so curious about it and I had been for years and I was like, I have to go try this. And then I had a ton of fun. It made me super fit and it was like great for my trail season. So I had already had like 2 instances of like chasing that curiosity, saying yes, and then it working out well for me. Where I was like, yeah, Skimo is just like another one of those. So I'm just gonna say yes. And here we are, it's like now we've had 3 instances of me doing this and it's all it just keeps working out, which I don't know, I'm a little scared for like whatever next idea I have because I'm probably gonna just keep saying yes to them, but it's working
Well, I
for
know,
me.
but that confidence comes from somewhere. I mean, it kind of builds on itself. I mean, every other athlete you're competing against is trying to do the opposite. They're trying to we've all been told, narrow focus, specialize. Maybe not as a child. I think that's really what can set people apart is that range, of having those experiences from the past to draw on. Obviously, you have those, but yet it does sound like you're building confidence through each one of these crazy ideas that you have. You build momentum and confidence.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. It's like every one of those things has taught me something absolutely massive that I now think is like very integral to either like my physical preparation to be my best on the trails or like my mental acuity as an athlete. Like the bike racing, just to take that as an example, like
Yeah,
I lined up in a pro women's start at a gravel race and I'm like terrified. Like I'm so scared that I'm going to hurt myself or like get in someone else's way. I have no idea what I'm doing. And to then just like gun goes off, ride for 6 hours, have to figure it out, and then actually figure it out and walk away from that race being like, okay, um, I can mentally deal with the like pressure of being very insecure and like concerned and unsure and I can still have a good race and like put it together. And that's like, okay, then when I get on a trail start at any point in the future, I'm standing there with this like extreme confidence in my abilities. I'm like, whether I'm having a good day, a bad day, whether I'm like very confident that I will excel or I'm very like worried that I won't, like I'm going to figure out how to make it happen. And it's just like a really, I don't know, I think it's just given me a lot of confidence.
I hear you have a mountain bike race coming up. Tell the folks what you're focused on now.
Um, I'm gonna be doing Leadville 100 mountain bike, which is feeling kind of crazy, to be honest. It's, like, a little bit out of my comfort zone, which is exactly why I'm doing it. The idea
Nice.
actually originally started with a good friend from childhood who's in med school, and she was like, "I'm gonna do Leadville, you should come join." And she's doing it as a fundraiser, and I kinda jumped on board late and, I don't know, wasn't sure what to do, and so then I realized that I could qualify through Silver Rush. So I signed up for
Yeah.
Silver Rush originally, and I was like, "This'll be good. I'll
Oh,
do 50 miles, see how it feels, see if I even like it, and, see how I do, and if I qualify for Leadville, that's great, and I'll probably do it." And then, yeah, now here we are, and I'm now racing for Training Peaks in Leadville 100, and I'm not gonna do Silver Rush. So we're just going diving straight into the deep end.
I know, I love it. That's awesome. Just taking it on. What does a typical week look like right now? Most people would think it's mostly cycling, but that may not be the case with you right now. What's it look like?
Yeah, well, Leadville is just one of a smattering of events that I'm doing this summer. So I'm
Uh,
also simultaneously preparing for Broken Arrow and Sierras and all. So I've got some and some other
yeah,
running races. So I have some
lofty.
high quality, intense running to be done as well.
Yeah.
Um, Right now, I'm in the process of, getting back into structure. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this, I really needed to take, a serious off season, which for me does not mean sitting around or, resting a ton. It just means, doing whatever I want every day.
Hmm.
And so I was doing a lot of, fun backcountry ski or mountaineering objectives in the Tetons and riding my bike here and there, running when I felt like it. And I'm trying to get back in the structure of, doing actual prescribed training every day. So that's right now a balance between doing one speed workout, running, one long run every week, and a couple of easy runs, interspersed with also doing a bit of volume on the bike and trying to build power, doing spin ups. And so I'm, yeah, trying to focus on both things at once right now and build power on the bike, also build speed running, which is a fun
Yeah.
process.
What's maybe I don't know, the scariest thing or the biggest weakness you might have around mountain biking and preparing for, Leadville 100?
I think the scariest thing for me is just that it's mountain biking, which I know it's not super technical, which is why I think it will work for me. But I mountain bike, but not a ton. I'm a lot more comfortable with bike handling on a gravel bike, and super easy cross country rides. The thought of going hard for that many hours and then also having a somewhat technical trail is really intimidating for me, and I'm, looking forward to the process of just, trying to get out on the mountain bike more and, get better at bike handling and just get better at, being in that environment because that's just not somewhere that I've pushed myself before.
What would a successful Leadville race look like?
Oh my gosh. I don't think it has anything to do with performance or outcome because
Mm.
it's so out of my normal event that I have, 0 concept actually of, where I should or should not be in that race. It has nothing to do with performance. If I come away from Leadville and I'm like, "I felt good, I fueled well, the fuel went down easily, and I, enjoyed the actual act of doing this mountain bike race," I think I will feel really, really happy with it. And if I, also have things that I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna fix that, and I'm gonna do it again." If I wanna do it
Yeah,
again, that will be a
yeah.
huge indicator of success for me.
You're preparing for this 7, 8 hour, whatever, Leadville. Um, Trail running, you have longer trail running races, Sky Series, but then again, like the Skimo is like, okay, 7 minutes. How do you think about volume, like, throughout the year? Do you look at past year's data at all and see volume hours? Are you going through base periods, build periods, peak periods at a macro level? Or is it all just all these super micro mini cycles that all depend on the next race?
Um, that's a great question. I feel like my training is if you were a scientist and you looked at my physiology and then you looked at my training plan, you would be like, "What the heck?" It probably looks really hectic and it looks like I'm just training for, one season at a time. I'm preparing for the next couple of months at most. But I think, overall, that's not really how I view my training. I view my training as honestly not even just preparing for Leadville or just training for Broken Arrow and Sears and all. Like, I view my training as like I'm training for my life. I'm training to be like
Mm.
the fittest version of myself as an athlete. And like the sports that I'm doing are getting dialed up or dialed down depending on what I'm doing in the next couple of months. But like the overall volume and the overall training effect is similar and like pretty consistent. Like I train with the exception of, like, down periods where I'm like, "Okay, it's my off season. I'm gonna, like, do less intensity," and then, being in season and doing a lot more intensity and a little bit less volume. Like, it's flowing for sure, but it's more of, like, a continuous thing than it would probably look like from
Yeah.
somebody outside looking in.
How are you managing sponsorships? I mean, I believe Brooks is probably one of your biggest sponsors, and they don't have much to do with skiing or mountain biking. Walk us through how you're navigating that world of being a professional athlete and supporting and working with sponsors through all this.
Yeah, I mean, I should just give a huge shout out to Brooks because while they're not, like, playing in all the spaces that I am necessarily, like, they have fully enabled me to explore everything, both in terms of, like, my financial stability and also in terms of, like, saying yes because, like, Brooks fully they're supporting me along with my other sponsors, and they do kind of have the power to tell me that I can't do these things, and every time I've gone to them with an idea or a question about, "Hey, I'm thinking about this coming year, like, what do you think?" They're just, like, resoundingly behind me and say, "Yes, let's do it. Like, let's figure out how to make this work for everyone." Um, and so I was able to explore Skimo this winter because Brooks was on board, which is amazing.
Mhm.
Um, that being said, I'm, like, definitely it's been a little bit interesting trying to figure out how to navigate, like, being a professional athlete in multiple spaces and like having sponsors across different industries and make sure that I'm like, meeting um their needs in all these ways and like keeping everyone super happy and like doing my best with that, which is like I've learned it's like way more of a job than I ever expected it would be when I was younger. Looking at professional athletes, I was like, "Oh, they just train. Like that's amazing." It's like it's way more than training. There's a lot of admin going on in my life right now trying to like make it all work and do a good job for everybody, but I also really enjoy that part of my job. I think it's really fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. Brooks is doing that. I think we're seeing more of that. I mean, brands transcend oftentimes their primary sport, and I see Tour de France cycling teams sponsored by running shoes. Well, okay, they're
Yeah.
wearing them on the podium, but hey, like you can wear Brooks on the podium, and and Dienafit. Um, another intriguing training question I have for you is, if you're thinking about like doing a threshold day, is it always the same kind of structure and you're just fitting in a different sport? So let's say I'm going to do 4 times 8 minutes at threshold with 3 minute recoveries. And it doesn't matter if it's running or cycling or skimo. Like, is that kind of a thought process you have when you think about actual individual training days and different physiological systems that you're trying to hit? They're basically the same structure, but you're just changing up the sports, or are they radically different?
Oh, yeah, I like this question too. They're relatively similar, I would say. Like I think the big difference is like if I was trying to get like kind of a similar training effect, but looking at one version of the workout being running and one version of the workout being cycling.
Hmm.
Um, the running one, it's like maybe I'm going for like a 12-mile run, which is gonna take me like, I don't know, an hour and 15 minutes to like do my warm up, do the workout in the middle, and then do the cool down. Like it's gonna be like kind of abbreviated compared to the cycling where it's like maybe I'm doing the same intervals, but there's like an hour of warm up and an hour of cool down. So the whole volume is like 3 hours.
Hmm.
Um, so I think there's like a little bit of difference there. And historically, like, I have done most of my kind of longer, beefier workouts, like threshold style stuff running. Um, and then like the cycling has kind of been more of like me just trying to build power or like do a lot of volume where I'm like the bike quote unquote workouts are like me doing 6 by 1 minute hills really hard at the end of like a 3 hour ride. Um,
Hmm.
Instead of, like, yeah, doing, like, a kind of more structured, like, bigger workout in the bike.
Are you seeing differences in recovery after the different sport types? Do you think of recovery all the same, or do you actually see differences in recovery? And how do you track recovery? What do you wake up and look at, and how do you know?
Um, I'm kind of funny with I'm gonna start with the second question first. Like the
Yeah.
tracking stuff, I feel like I am like a very um I'm more of like a feely person. Like I wake up and I'm like, how am I feeling? I don't track my HRV. I don't consistently track my resting heart rate. But I feel like I'm pretty aware of like what's going on with my body. Like I wake up and I'm like, oh, I'm really cooked from yesterday. Like I do not feel
Yeah.
good. Or
You
I'll
know,
if
you
I
just
do
know it.
know if I don't know first thing in the morning, like I will know by the time I go try and train again. Like I'll get on my bike
Mhm.
and be like, oh, body says no. Um, I've gone through periods of, like, tracking my data a lot more consistently and actually looking at it every single day, but, um, yeah, in terms of, like, how the different things hit, I think I feel like I leave a lot of it up to my coach. I'm coached by David Roach, and he, like at this point, he's been coaching me for 3 years. I feel like he generally knows how things are gonna go for me, which is really nice. Like, I just kinda give, like, full trust. I'm like, if I'm gonna need recovery, he's gonna build in the recovery. And I'm pretty good at dialing back. Like, I'm the type of athlete where, like, if I'm if I'm not feeling good, like, I will cut my run in half. I won't run. I'll take an extra off day. Or I'll, like, switch out. Maybe I have, like, a 10-mile easy run, and I'll be like, "Oh, an hour bike ride, that's gonna be way easier on my body. I'm gonna do that instead," and just, like, go
Mhm.
spin the legs and, like, get the blood flow going, and that's that.
We've talked about a lot of different disciplines of training, but what about strength? How does that
Yeah.
fit into your program, if at all?
Um, Strength looks a lot of different ways for me, and it's also, like, very much in phases. So, when I was racing track, I was, like, religiously in the gym doing a lot of single leg stability stuff, trying to build a lot of power for the 1500. I was, like, very, very routine about going to the gym. And
Yeah.
then as I started doing trail, I found that, like, I was just doing too many different movements, it felt like. Like, I was just, like the body is just, like, getting honestly, it felt confused. Like, it's, like,
Mm.
doing gym stuff, and then also going for, like, a big trail run was, like, I don't know if this is serving me that well, and I, like, had a number of things in my training that were just pointing towards, like, overdoing it. And so David and I, like, took out the lifting at that point, and I did a summer of just doing trail and riding my bike. And I should also add I do a lot of yoga, and so I think, like and I do hard yoga classes, and so I feel like I get a lot of, like, strength and mobility kind of in one from the yoga,
Yeah.
and at that point, I was like, "Okay, I actually think after experiencing both, like, doing religious lifting and not doing lifting, I learned that when I'm trail running, not lifting is kinda better for me, like, when I'm in season doing a lot of other
Mm.
intensity and a lot of other activities." Um, so now I kind of am in this routine where I, like, lift in my off season, and I don't lift in the middle of the summer when I'm racing and doing a bunch of trail.
Yeah. You are also coaching a bit, right?
Mhm.
So what
I
kind of what's your I don't know, what do the athletes look like that you coach? What's your ideal athlete that you like to work with?
Um, my ideal athlete is excited a lot about a lot of outdoor sports and trying to, like, maximize in multiple categories. Like, I haven't really worked with anybody who is trying to, like, just be really fast at the marathon or just run a really fast 5K. I've worked with people who are, like, doing a different activity every day of the week. They're, like, trying to train for a gravel race and do a marathon, or they're, like, I don't know, yeah, trying to do some climbing and also run a 23K trail race. And so it's, like, just a lot of balancing, and I think that
Yeah.
the reason that they, like, come to me is because I do that with my own career, and they see that, and they're like, "Oh, maybe this person will understand, like, how I want my life to look." Like, I'm not a running coach. I'm also, like, not a bike coach. Like, I just am good at, like, Tetrising all this stuff together and using, like, what I've learned from, like, doing research and what I've learned from my own coach and what I've learned from my own personal experience of blending different sports, and then I just, like, try and, like, make something super, super personalized for each athlete that I work with and, like, give them a program that will, like, yeah, let them try and maximize in all these different things that they're trying to do at the same time.
Yeah. What about for folks that are looking they've thought about jumping in a totally different discipline that they've never done before? what's some words of advice from you to help them get over that hurdle?
Yeah. I mean, I would say just try it. Like everyone starts somewhere and you don't know whether you're going to be starting at the bottom or somewhere in the middle or at the top. Like I had no idea where I would land in any of these things that I've tried. Like I genuinely thought that I could go do this gravel bike race and get last. And then I actually did well. Like same with Skimo. It's like I have no idea what's going to happen here. So like you can't have high expectations, you can't have low expectations, just, like, go in with a totally open mind and know that
Yeah.
you might end up wherever, anywhere, and that's partly why it's, like, so fun to chase that curiosity is because it's, like, a total experiment, and that's just, like, the beauty in the whole thing.
Also, being a beginner is fun.
Yeah, I love being a beginner. I'm currently learning how to climb, which has been really fun. I'm, like
Oh
I've
yeah,
done a I've done a fair
rock
amount of
climb.
bouldering. Yeah, I've done a fair amount of bouldering in the past, but I've not done a lot of, like, sport climbing or trad or anything, and so I'm learning how to do that, and I'm like, "Wow, it is really fun to be a beginner," especially when you have other things that you know that you're good at that, like, give you confidence to then, like, go into a new space where you feel completely the opposite.
Yeah.
It's just, like, refreshing, and it's fun, and it's exciting, and there's just so much to learn.
Well, and also like not putting expectations on the result, as you said earlier. I mean, you're going in Leadville, but you in your own head is like, it's like this fun element, this learning, I guess the process, right, is kind of like the main goal of it. But not putting these huge lofty expectations on, a thing that you're a beginner at.
Totally. Yeah, and I mean, also, if you're an elite athlete or even, like, you know, a regular everyday athlete who's, like, used to, pushing themselves in a space that you're, like, comfortable, you're familiar with, you're, like let's say you just race a lot in whatever you do, like, you always have expectations. You can try and mentally check yourself out of them. You can, like,
Yeah.
play mental games with yourself and be like, "Oh, there's not that much pressure. Oh, I don't expect anything." But, like, you genuinely do because you just know where you should be or where you think you should be, and it's hard to, like, get that out of your head. So it's really
Yeah.
fun if you're coming from that space to then go do something where, like, you actually genuinely have no idea. And so
Yeah.
you get to go in fully free of expectations. It's, like, a really refreshing experience.
And it's just this kind of like mindset of like exploration and seeing where things are taking you. And it's going to be amazing following you for the next however long. I mean, who knows where you're going to be in 5 years from now, right? Still doing all the sports and the Olympics and everything else.
Hopefully, yeah, that's the goal.
Awesome. Well, Anna, thanks so much for being on with us today. It was a pleasure following you throughout I don't know, the short amount of time I've known about you. It's been an awesome ride. So it's going to be great following you throughout the next few years. Good luck in Leadville. And yeah, thanks for coming on and giving us some words of wisdom.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it was great chatting, and, yeah, stay tuned for how all my rogue ideas turn out.
I love it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Endurance Unlimited. Be sure to like, subscribe, and follow us on your platform of choice to never miss new episodes. Also, be sure to leave a 5-star rating to let your coach and the algorithm know you're ready to dial in your training. Find more resources to help you take on your next challenge at TrainingPeaks.com or find us on social media at TrainingPeaks. Got questions? Leave a comment or send an email to podcast@trainingpeaks.com. Good luck in whatever you're training for and trust the process to reach your potential.